the Lake Michigan Angler Podcast.
Fish on, guys, right here.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Lake Michigan Angler Podcast. Today we are here with longtime kayak fisherman Phil Skoropad. I'm Rob, and this is Michael.
Welcome back, y'all. This has been this episode anyway, or the conversation surrounding kayak fishing has been one that we've been asked about when was going to make its rounds on the actual podcast itself. In fact, there was one comment we received from an individual that was pretty adamant that we should only be talking about kayak fishing. But we're covering salmon fishing on Lake Michigan in its totality, big boat, small boat, kayak, shore. It's everything. We want to make sure we're sharing information and covering all facets for everyone, because obviously here at the shop, we support and all of our local anglers, and we want to make sure we have that covered here. But yeah, finally kayak fishing. Yeah. We're talking about it, guys. Welcome. Now, for those of you that are on boats, this isn't. I would say don't tune out necessarily, because
you can definitely learn from everybody's experience. I mean, I've learned a lot from the boat fishermen that I've applied to kayak fishing, and I know a lot of boat fishermen that have applied things to their own experience based on what we're doing in our kayaks.
Yeah, especially in your smaller boats, you can kind of get away with. I think there's some areas that you could try and adapt, or maybe use some kayak fishing techniques that you could try for your small boat, because it's still more quieter, or versus the bigger guys, the bigger boats. So you have a level of stealth compared to them. So you can still get away with stuff. Phil's here. Phil's been kayak fishing. Well, let's talk about your journey. When did you start?
When I saw Rob catching some awesome fish out of a kayak. I think you were fishing in college.
Yeah.
And as soon as I graduated from college in 2006, so that's 15 years ago. Sorry to age myself, but I went out, bought a kayak, and hit the fall salmon run. And
he was sick of watching me paddle back and forth in front of him catching fish while he was on shore.
I still remember.
What kayaks were you guys using back then? This in 2006, like 06?
Yeah.
Kayak industry wasn't nowhere near what it is today.
No, there wasn't.
What was on the
all.
market? What was on the market?
Rob had one that looked like a 55-gallon drum, cut in half. I had this Bimini Perception that me and him drove to Neenah, Wisconsin to pick up.
That was a nice kayak.
We went up there. I had twine rope to tie it onto my roof.
Oh, man.
I had no idea. And so the guy gave us a couple straps to tie it on the roof. And I carry it on my head down to Pike Creek, like on my head, this 15-foot long kayak to go launch at Pike and catch kings.
It was a nice kayak.
Yeah.
I had, I don't even remember the brand it was.
Didn't even have a brand.
It was a low-end kayak. It was a Kingfisher, like 12 or something.
Okay.
And it was the absolute worst color that you could have for Lake Michigan. It was
Lake Michigan blue.
Yeah, it was Lake Michigan blue.
So you get lost out in the water, you're
it was
done.
Lake Michigan blue mixed with white, like a white camo. I mean,
That was a good one.
Yeah, I didn't get a choice on the color. It was just I got what I got.
Well, yeah, I mean, Jesus Christ, I got into kayak fishing in 2013, and that's when there seemed to be a lot more brands at that time. That's how it kind of got on my radar, because I started looking at options. At that time, I was working downtown. You worked downtown Chicago and stuff, and I thought to myself, I want to get a big boat, put it right in one of these slips out here in the lakefront, and then I started thinking the economics of it. I'm very I don't know what's the word. I'm very cognizant of my spending.
Cheap?
No, I'm not cheap.
I was thinking the same thing.
Jesus Christ. I'm not cheap. I'm just, financially responsible about my spending, right? And I thought to myself,
Frugal, cheap?
No.
We're kidding.
No, I know. But no, when you think about it, I mean, in our area, you have small window.
Expensive, yeah.
It's expensive, especially in Chicago. You've got only a few months that you can really operate it.
Well, the fish are even there. When are fish there?
Well, then let's not even get into that, right? Okay. So then I was like, okay, maybe I'll get like a bass boat, something I can just trailer around. And then I thought, well, where am I going to put it? Then in Cook County, for a lot of our lakes, like Bussy and so on and so forth, preserve lakes. At the time, I was still doing bass fishing, right? So I'm like, well, you can't take a motor on them. They're electric motor only. So what's the point of even having a big motor? And that's when I started looking. I was like, well, what else is out there? And that's when I discovered kayaks, and so there was a good amount at Jackson at the time that I was aware of. You had Wilderness was, so like they were starting to really become a buzz thing in the fishing industry. So how did you even get into this before that even started to kind of like raise up in the scene?
Like I grew up fishing in a boat and fishing from shore. And when I was in college, I was fishing a lot, and I was just getting sick of fishing from shore because I didn't have access to a boat. And I was like, I bet I could start fishing these harbors in a kayak. Like I didn't know that kayak fishing was a thing. It was at that point, but it was just starting out on the coasts, on the east and west coast.
Very niche.
And a lot of the same brands that we have today were around, but they weren't making fishing kayaks.
Right.
Jackson was making kayaks, and Wilderness Systems were making touring kayaks and sit-on tops, but they weren't really meant for fishing. And I just started Googling kayak fishing, and then all of a sudden I realized, like, it wasn't my idea. There were other people doing it. It just wasn't so much around here. And, there was a little bit of research. So, like, my initial plan was just to buy a cheap sit-inside kayak that you see a lot of people have.
Yeah, which is
and just throw a couple rod holders on it because I didn't know anything. And that'd be good enough. And then I realized, all right, so that might not be the best route based on the few things that are out there to read about it. And then I kind of stumbled into this Kingfisher, and the day I got it, I just threw 2 rod holders on it and just went straight out into the lake. I'd never kayaked before.
Jesus Christ. This is a paddle, right?
Paddle kayak, and I had this like $15 paddle.
I was just gonna say it weighed like 10 pounds, like galvanized
I didn't know there
plastic.
It was
no
like
curve.
aluminum with big squared paddles on the end.
Oh,
like
man.
super heavy. I didn't know there was any difference between paddles.
Yeah.
Or anything.
Yeah.
And I used it the entire time I had that kayak too. I never upgraded. It was just a learning experience after that.
Yeah. So you in the same boat, figuratively speaking, as far as getting the same kind of thing. You had a paddle kayak and.
Yeah, I bought a little bit of a nicer paddle. It was lighter and it had curves to the blades.
And I mean,
It
to be fair, in that time period, I mean, it wasn't like the tech. Like now they got carbon fiber stuff, and it's way more.
They had some good ones.
Did they really?
Yeah, they had
Oh.
some of that stuff out there, but there was nobody to say, "Hey, this is what you actually need."
Yeah, this is
actually
gonna be better.
I just saw a paddle, one paddle. What's the difference between a paddle and another paddle, right?
Right.
And he was in college. So
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. You're working on the broke budget.
yeah,
Got it.
the mic budget.
yeah.
Like what? No.
The mic budget.
God. Thanks.
You're welcome.
So fast forward from that period up until when did you guys get into the Hobie line? That and more so, we're talking about pedal kayaks here because that became a thing. Really came into its own. I think that was the first revolution in kayaks, which was the pedal drive stuff. When did you guys venture into that?
I had my eyes on Hobies for a while. I got my first one the first year that the Pro
2010?
Angler. It was either 2009 or 2010 is when the first model Pro Angler came out, and I got that. It was when I was getting when I was actually signing up for the Hobie fishing team, and I was actually thinking of getting an Outback or a Revolution. I don't remember which, but during the process of me joining the team is when they announced the Pro Angler, the first one, and I was like, oh, that's
Perfect timing.
yeah, perfect timing. So, but I think I'd been kind of eyeing the Hobies for a couple of years just because I knew that pedaling was going to make such a big difference in the way I fished. So probably like 3 years because they've been around for a long time, those pedals. It's not like it's a new thing.
Right. But it was more so at that point they were doing just more leisure, like recreational usage,
More so
right?
that, and they were...
The boat themselves, they were designed to be just more rec.
I mean, they were just starting to target the fishermen.
Yeah.
But it was still on the coast. And then, like, really, like, they had Hank Parker was, like, their freshwater guy. So there was a little bit. They had the Hank Parker model Outback. There was a little bit of fishing, and it was just before it blew up. So when kayak fishing blew up, then the Hobies blew up with it because they just went hand in hand so well.
Yeah. And same time for you? Is this same period you were?
Yeah, I think I was still rocking my paddle, and then I saw Rob and he convinced
Flying by you with the pedals?
Oh, well, I was flying in the other one because mine was really fast. It had the secondary stability.
Yeah.
So
The perception was a
it
pretty nice
felt
quick
like you were
kayak.
going to tip all the time, but you wouldn't because it had that stability. But yeah, after Rob was like, dude, you got to get this. And he let me try it. And I was like, oh, that's pretty nice.
Yeah. So still in this early period for you guys, you're really in uncharted waters with this fishing technique because there's not a lot of. It's not like it is now. Even the internet wasn't the same at that period where finding all this information wasn't out there because it wasn't even being discussed, maybe largely. What were some of the kind of trial and errors in its use for your fishing out here? What were some of the moments you're like, some of the things you might have changed, how you adapted and used it?
Well,
That comes to mind.
like my first trip out, I kind of learned a lot that day because I'd never kayaked before, but I boat fished before, so I was trying to use, the stuff that we use in the boat out in the kayak, and then trying to adapt it already to the kayak before even doing it. So I remember the first time I went out, and it was in the spring. I think it was April, and the cohos were in fairly shallow, and so I took my Dodgers and flies that I already had, but I tried running them with jet divers, and I tried running the Dipsy. And then I was flat. The first time out, I just went out and ran 3 rods. I didn't try to.
Wow,
I was not keeping anything simple.
No.
And so I learned some things there, like the jet divers don't work real well with Dodgers. Everything's in a sink. You're gonna stop, and everything's in a sink, and you get snagged. Just lots of little things like that. So it was like, all right, can't put Dodgers on jet divers anymore. And eventually, I just completely stopped using jet divers. Dipsies definitely add a lot of drag to the kayak. But yeah, you had to learn how to fight fish differently. Mm-hmm. Everything was a learning curve back then.
Yeah.
Ran some planer boards. Sometimes it's worth it. Sometimes it's not.
Not the little ones. We'd run full size.
Yeah.
You're running full. Oh,
yeah, I didn't even know little ones existed.
You
back
guys are
then.
psychos.
We just took everything that we knew
From the boat, yeah.
and tried in the
Try
kayak.
to do a 1-for-1 swap.
Dipsies, like everything.
Mm. But yeah, like the first time I went out, it was really windy. I should never have gone out. It was just straight west wind. And I lived right on the lake, and I just went off my own beach and just kept going east. And the wind was blowing so hard that I was going way too fast to actually catch a fish. It was just pushing me out there. And I wasn't even really comfortable in the kayak because I'd never kayaked before. And finally, I kind of looked over my shoulder and realized I was like, I'm really far offshore here. And I didn't even have any electronics, so I didn't know how deep I was or anything, but shore looked pretty small. So I was like, I better turn around. Mm-hmm. So I turn around, and now I'm slowing down because I'm going back into the wind. And now I'm finally going like actual speeds that a fish might bite at. And I don't think I had turned around for more than a couple minutes, and I had a spinning rod flatline behind me with a little Rapala, and that rod just started screaming. And I was like, there must have been like a log floating out there. I got snagged.
What are the odds, really?
They float around out there.
No, they do. But
I was like,
odds.
I was like, it seemed to me at that point it was better odds of a log than a fish.
Gotcha.
So I was like, it can't be a fish, especially screaming like that because I was fishing for cohos and I just wasn't. So I grabbed that spinning rod, and sure enough, it's a fish, and it's a king on there. And never fighting fish in a kayak, I just grabbed the rod and just let it do its thing. But meanwhile, my other rods all sank to the bottom, got snagged. It was just a big mess. The rods are bending in half. I'm trying to cut the line. I wasn't comfortable. It was windy. It was a big mess. And I eventually landed the fish once it was pretty much dead.
Wow.
But yeah, that was a learning experience. All right, so yeah, you're going to get snagged up. You want things to float if possible. You got to be mindful of all that stuff. And you have to, or you just forget it, just cut your lines. But the main thing is you have to be mindful of all those lines in the water. And then over time, we learned when you're fighting fish that you can use the fish to your advantage to do that, because it's going to, a big fish like that, and this wasn't a big king or anything, it was 13 pounds, but that was a pretty big first fish in the kayak.
Yeah.
Especially, it was fighting pretty hard in April. It's a cold water. Mm-hmm. So then you kind of learned after a while, if we keep the rod pointed at the bow of the kayak, then the fish is going to turn the kayak and pull the kayak, and you can at least keep your other lines moving a little bit. It's less stress on your tackle. because instead of like just fighting it off to the side and the wind's blowing the kayak one way, fish might be going the other way, and you're going to be losing a lot more line. So this way the kayak will kind of just go with the fish and then kind of tire out some more.
Yeah.
And especially because you don't have pedals at this time.
Yeah, this is just
yeah.
straight
You're not
paddling,
moving.
so there's no control really. You got to just use the fish to do it.
Yeah. That was a crazy time. How about for you, Phil? What was some of the stuff that...
You probably saw me agree with Rob, but I think I used, the same things that we did in the boat. I was using dipsies and J-plugs in front of the pike. And I was still catching fish, but that's how I knew how to fish. Full-size yellowbirds, like everything straight from the boat. And then, as we graduated, I guess, to the pedals, we were able to start implementing lead cores to get you down to the appropriate depth and just tried to keep it simple. To this day, I hate using planer boards. I think I catch more fish without them. There are applications that you do need them.
Like in front of Pike Creek is one of the, like when you're fishing real shallow like that.
Yeah, because then you only put 20 feet out to your bait that's a deep diving crankbait or whatever you're using, and then you send out your board. So yes, there are applications for it. There are times that certain fish are spooky, but I catch more fish without them.
Yeah, there were times we were definitely using them when it was just absolutely not necessary,
Right.
more of a detriment to us than anything.
Right.
Let me ask you guys, because I tend to see a lot of comments from folks that will say, if you're kayak fishing, you're crazy to be out there. What's wrong? A lot of times it's. I think initially it's shock that like really you go out in this vast body of water in this little thing, and then I think there's another kind of comment that's just like you're just nuts for even trying to do that. So there's like shock, and then there's also like you're just crazy for doing it. For you, why do each of you kayak fish? What drives you to do it versus the boat? Not Phil. You got a boat last year, was it? Yeah, last year was the first year.
2 years ago.
2 years ago already. Time flies. Yeah. So, you had picked up a boat, but prior to that, you've just been in the kayak, right? And then, both of you have done boat fishing prior to kayak fishing, but kayak fishing became primarily your primary form of fishing. So, for you, what were those driving factors in doing that and going with that route as your primary choice for fishing versus the boating way or shore and so on and so forth?
Similar to what you said, I've been thinking about buying a boat for a really long time, but then I would need a truck to pull it. I'd need a garage to store it. It was going to be very, very expensive. I didn't think about all those other things, obviously. So a kayak seemed like a very logical explanation and a logical way to get on the water. And, I think that getting out in the kayak and getting close to the fish, and it's even more maneuverable. I've talked to Rob about this before, and I've only fished in front of the root in my boat one time. I didn't catch any fish, and I wouldn't go do it again because I know that if I was in a kayak, I can catch fish. I can maneuver. I can stop if there's a boat that's going through my pass that I want to go through. I'll just stop. My baits will float up, and I'll wait till I can go, and I can just go back and forth in that prime area where a boat has to make a huge circle around. They're spending time when there's no fish just to get back through their pass, and they might be blocked by another boat, and they can't just stop and wait. So I think we're way more effective being in it. I can turn on a dime. I can fight a fish. I can get out of the way. I can do everything that a boat can do more effectively, especially in like those tight quarters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely in the harbor periods when you're kind of in close or very near shore, and you do find those fish kind of schooled up in certain areas or certain parts of the water column, and you can really target that. And for you, Rob?
Yeah, it's the same thing. I started it because of the logical reasons, but once I caught that first king, I was like, oh, this is pretty awesome. This is definitely more fun than catching him in a boat.
Yeah.
That fighting a king in a kayak experience is much different than. They're fun in a boat, don't get me wrong, but once you experience a fish like drag you in the kayak and jump over the kayak and splash you and all that kind of stuff, that's the only way you want to catch them after that.
It is hard. It's hard to go back. Yeah, for sure. I think everything is is more. It's I guess for lack of a better word, it's just more intimate. You're on the water. You're that close to the water. Mm-hmm. When you're trolling the rod, the hits are. I swear they're more violent. Maybe it's just because you're in a small kayak and you're just trolling these little rods But I swear everything is just intensified. That's probably what it is.
Yeah.
It's just everything's just magnified more than what you get in the boat because you're just here. You got your gear and you feel every moment of it. And I think that's where at least for me, that's where the draw is. That's what hooked me. Is that feeling like, oh man, you're in this little vessel and the minute you get popped. Plus, it's also cool. I'm sure you guys have done this many times. When you're out there, you're fishing, and you're killing it, and you come back and you hear that you've outfished a lot of boats. That's something that happens a lot for kayak guys. Why is that?
I think for what Phil was talking about before, especially when it comes to September and we're fishing in front of those harbors. We especially the last couple of years, we've seen just small pods of fish here, small pods of fish there, where they're not just spread out all over the mouth of a harbor or in the harbor, like we've seen in some years. They were just in these small pods, and we can just get back on those fish so much quicker, in addition to having the stealth and everything, But, yeah, we'll communicate with each other out there and like, hey, that spot right there, where I went through, there was a bunch of fish marked in there. And then Phil will go right through there and get one. And then I'll turn around. I'll go right through that school, a minute later and get one. And we can stay on top of that school of fish really easily and just keep picking them off. And, next thing you know, we just got 5 out of that school, out of this one waypoint. And then, then the fish kind of scatter and we just find the next one. And we can stay on top of that.
And also because we can slow down more than a boat can. So... you might find out that on your turn, your rod that's almost dead in the water is the one that takes the hit. I've gotten hits from fish where my baits were probably floating up.
Yep, floating up, yep.
So boats can't do that.
Yeah, the inconsistency of our speed and the way we fish is a combination because we fish so many crankbaits. The boat, some boats out there fishing crankbaits, but not a lot of them compared to the more traditional salmon lures, dodgers and flies and spoons and stuff. And the combination of running the crankbaits and with the kayak and the inconsistency of speed just really seems to trigger a lot of fish, trigger a lot of bites.
That's something I think is worth kind of diving in just a little bit more on, which is for sure hard baits, crankbaits, whatever, do work really well with the kayaks. And as you pointed out, the idea of the inconsistency here, if we can kind of expand on that for folks to kind of understand that a little bit more, what we mean by that, can you kind of describe that so people understand it?
Well, like the inconsistency in speed, because it's such a small and light vessel that every little thing affects the momentum of it, right? So a small boat wave, a small, a gust in wind, all these little things all of a sudden slow us down or maybe speed us up if we're going in a different direction. And then all that is translated into lures, so you get like running flicker shad or reef runners or whatever, and they kind of vibrate through the water and you hit that wave and they kind of stall, and then you go down the wave and it speeds up, and that just really triggers a lot of bites.
Yep.
And it's harder for the boats to take advantage of that, especially the bigger the boat is, it's heavier. They have a lot more momentum, and these little waves and everything don't affect them as much. And that's why we see like smaller boats will catch fish on crankbaits too at a better rate than the big boats normally do for the most part. I've talked to a couple of big boat guys that have had some crankbaits working for them, but typically, the 35-foot boat isn't catching many fish on crankbaits if they try them. Whereas we can fish right alongside them with the crankbaits and catch fish.
And
not that they're not catching fish. They might be running J-plugs in front of a harbor or something, or Dodgers in the spring, and they might still be catching fish, but we can have 2 completely different programs going on.
Right. And again, it goes back to like what I said, how many times coming back to shore and, you see the other guys coming in. How'd you do? It was a little slow out there. How'd you do? I limited it out, It's always a cool feeling. And that those moments for me is what just compels me to stay in the kayak. It's like, man, it's working. There's something to it. It's a stealth factor. It is that level of inconsistency because you said, yeah, you're you're moving in the waves, right? That wave hits you from the side. You're doing this. So what happens? Your rods are doing this. So it's as you're going, you're never really even going. If your fish finder says you're going 2.1, 2.2, take it with a grain of salt, because with all the movement, you're probably moving less and more, and you're constantly shifting, and your rods are doing this, right? So you imagine that lure, like you said, it not only is it doing its natural thing, but it's going up, it's doing this, it's stalling back, it's jetting forward. So that bait is really very three-dimensional in the water, which I think is really cool, and as you pointed out, really effective for us in the kayak and all that stuff. For you, Phil, as the kayak fishing scene picked up, let's say now in the mid 2000s, so past 2010, and this is where I feel like all the brands started focusing, Wilderness, all the big brands at the time started focusing on making like fishing specific kayaks and all that stuff. What was your take on the scene as more people started becoming aware of it? What did you see here locally with folks? Did you see an uptake on people getting into it, doing it? What was your observation of all that?
Yeah, I think all the shore guys that we knew that we'd run back into when we're in the kayaks, they're looking at us like, okay, I got to get one. So all the shore guys that we used to know have all either tried our kayak or gone in the double with him, and they think it's cool. So then they get one. So, I mean, and age is no barrier to being in a kayak. I hear a lot of like older folks that say, I'm too old to get in a freaking kayak. These seats are super comfortable. They're adjustable. They have lumbar support. I mean, they're really comfortable. It's like sitting in a lawn chair in this big floating platform. Super stable. You can stand up in it in the right conditions. But yeah, I mean, it was very popular. It was very
especially
popular.
Now, like the level of where things are at now, they're very comfortable. Generally across all the big brands, the popular brands, there's a huge focus on comfort. And so to your point about the age thing, and for folks watching, don't be shy on the age, thinking you can't do it. The great thing about pedal kayaks is your leg muscles are your strongest muscles. So if your legs are good to go, then you should be able to do it. And
you add a trolling motor.
I mean, it's very viable now where you can have a trolling motor on it.
You want to cheat?
We want to go there with it now. We can talk about that. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you can either DIY add-on, or there's brands that have it integrated already, so that
They're pretty nice motors out there.
Yeah.
And to go back to like the seats and stuff, like my first kayak, after I used it for like a couple years, I couldn't spend more than 4.5 hours in it. Like my back would get so sore, my legs would tingle, and have like shooting pain in them.
Yeah.
What did you have, like that just cushion that folded
Yeah, it was
together?
like just a regular traditional kayak seat with no padding, no support of any kind.
It reminds me of the early Outbacks. Remember, there was just like the foam. It was just a foam pad.
Nothing
Yeah, it
really
was
there.
like nothing there.
And then when I got into the Pro Angler, which the seat at that time is primitive compared to what we have now,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
I went into that Pro Angler, and like one of the second trips I ever took with it, I spent 11 hours in that kayak, never got out, and felt perfectly fine. And I was like, this is amazing, because I couldn't even come close to that in that old kayak without being in a ton of pain. And then, now we have lumbar support.
Armrest.
Yeah.
Armrest. You can add an attachment to have your drink.
Hobie
holder.
definitely still, in my opinion, has the top tier seating of all the kayaks. It's an executive chair in a kayak. It really is.
Yeah.
It's like almost they went to Herman Miller and got them to design it for me. It's that comfortable still. But across the board, a lot of brands, they've upped their game in that, because
You didn't have a choice.
you
I mean,
have
if
to
you
be
didn't-
comfortable. There's not. I mean, that
You're not gonna
is
go back.
arguably the biggest selling point in the kayak is your comfort in it. So as you're looking out there for one, check out the seating. I always tell people, demo it. There's a lot of places. Well, there's a few places in our area where you can go, vendors, sell kayaks and all that stuff. But a lot of times they have demo days. So stop by and get your butt in it, because that's really the only way you're gonna know. You can look at it on. We've all done this, right? Sit online for hours looking at the the review video, the teaser video, the website of the kayak that you're eyeing, and you're just kind of fantasizing like, oh man, I think how would I rig this up and all that stuff. That's great, but get in one and demo it so you actually sit in it and feel and look at, okay, all right, I can see where everything is now. I'm comfortable. How am I going to lay this out? How am I going to kind of rig this out? Speaking of rigging, I think that's a big part for kayak fishing. A common thing that we talk about in the podcast with some of our other guests have always been about just being like efficient in various forms. Mm-hmm. I think there's no better place that this needs to happen than in kayak fishing because you're limited in your space. So, Phil, for you, how have you over the years kind of refined your setup and in how you utilize your kayak to make it efficient for the fishing? Because it's easy to get out there and just want to take everything, and you're in this little vessel and it can become crowded. Then you have to pull a fish in. It becomes a cluster. And a lot of people early on do that. It's not their fault, but it's just learning pains of the process.
I think one of the bigger changes that I've made maybe in the last 3 to 5 years was adding these extension rod holders and adjustable rod holders. Before, I would just use a very basic Scotty holder, and the handles would come into the center of the kayak, so your legs were like under the handles.
Crammed, yeah.
Yeah, so now they have these adjustable arms that go up and out. So now your handles are up here, so you have a bunch of room between your knees. And then also like the Hobie H crate and your homemade milk crate, whatever you want with rod holders on it. I think having spare rods behind you out of the way is huge. Having a good spot for your net, just keeping your area pretty clean is very important, and having lures and pliers or whatever kind of tools that you need very accessible to you, so you're not. If you get cold, okay, here's a good example. If you get cold or it starts to rain and you need to put on a rain jacket, you need to be able to get to that, not get up, climb over something while there's waves and wind and all of that, and like risk falling out of your kayak. So you need to have things accessible and within arm's grasp, but put away so that you have room to maneuver in the kayak when you have it.
That absolute great point, because you could be screwing around trying to find some stuff, and it's
usually when a fish bites.
It's that, or it's usually when that rogue wave will come, and because you're leaning and you're looking this way and you don't have a sense of what's coming, catches you off guard and you tip, or you fall over, or you whatever the case may be. Now you lost all your gear in the water. 100% agree with Phil. You got to have your stuff kind of situated when you're at the launch, where it's going to go, and to alleviate that from happening.
And a flodongo. Those work really well. We'll get into that later.
What is that?
If you got to go to the bathroom in your kayak.
Oh.
I invented a flodongo.
Oh, well, this, okay. We're going to sell it here at LMA. So, Rob, for you, kind of same question. How are you situating your stuff? You of all are probably the best person about this, but how are you situating your stuff?
So I
to just be
basically
efficient?
have a pile of lures in the back of my truck.
Yes, he does.
And then I just throw it in my kayak when I start fishing, and then I take it out of my kayak when I'm done fishing, and then I do it all over again the next time.
He's not lying. I have the footage from when he was fishing, and I should release it because he sent it to me. I have the footage of him. It was this winter period. It was open water winter fishing right before everything froze over, and he's fishing for browns and steel, and I just see the video footage he sent me. We caught a fish, but before that, he pulled up this glob of, oh my! I looked at, I said, Rob, what is that in there? He's like, oh, it's my lures.
I was just going to say.
It was a cluster.
He doesn't like using tackle boxes.
Oh
he just takes extra line over here and then wraps up all the lures.
Don't do it, Rob. Don't do it, Rob. I'm telling you guys,
I
don't do
still
it.
have like 5 boxes of lures with me or so, but like I know I'm going to use the same 6 lures.
Yeah, you see how he pulled that out of his pocket with like.
He literally, he did.
6 lures.
And they're all, and they're all the trebles are like this.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's he shakes them off. Whatever one that falls off is the one he uses.
Those are the good ones. Fish.
If they're in the ball, that means it's a good lure.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Listen, for Christmas, I'll have to get you pool noodle so you can at least stick them on a pool noodle and just carry
I have
noodle.
all sorts of pool noodles. I'm not going to use that. I'm just going to keep.
Lord.
It works perfectly fine. And
Yeah, he's on another level.
It catches fish for me.
You look at my stuff. My stuff's like color coordinated, small boxes. I have a reef runner box, a thunderstick box, a spoon box. Like I have all of my stuff right there. I know where it is at all times. Rob.
Yeah, no,
Different.
he's he's been doing it for so long. I think that he's just like, he just, because when we'll go to launch, like his whole setup is he'll just chuck the kayak out in the water, and then he'll attach his fish finder and he'll throw some lures in there and he just jets off.
Everything's on his kayak at all times. He loads it up with all his stuff. He takes it off with all his stuff. It's always there. And he knows where everything is. You could be like, what'd you catch fish on yesterday? He's like, this one. Yeah.
Exactly.
Like, what? How'd you find that? Do you have any more of those? He's like, yeah. Here. Like, oh, God. Okay. Yeah, there's one in the back of my truck. Just look under this. Oh, there it is.
Oh, my God. Yeah, the funny thing is, obviously you can tell that everyone has their own style and their own kind of way of doing it, which is the great thing about kayaking. I mean, everyone's stuff is always different. The setups are different. There's going to be some kind of commonality between guys' setups, if you will. But, how you rig it is it's very much a personal factor.
It depends on the kayak. I mean, when we had paddle kayaks, we rigged them differently. Mm-hmm. Because you had to put your rod holders in a place that wouldn't interfere with the paddle. Right. So, those first kayaks, and I kind of was thinking, I was waiting. I ordered the kayak, so I had like 2 weeks to just think about it before I got it. And I was already thinking about those things. And so back then, we'd take those Scotty rod holders and we kind of put them equal with our ankles. Yeah. And I still hit the rod with the paddle sometimes, but they were out of the way enough, but you could still reach them when a fish hit or whatever. And then once we got into paddle kayaks, that all changed. We got the rod holders right next to us. Yeah. And the cool thing is now, like every fishing kayak, for the most part, has some sort of track system or rail on it where you don't even have to drill holes. Like back then, you mounted a rod holder, you drilled holes.
It was staying there.
Yeah.
It was no changing it.
Or you were going to have holes in it.
Yeah, exactly. So now you're like, I don't really, and I kind of change things all the time based on what I'm doing. I'll be like, I want to use this style rod holder. I want it to be like 5 inches further back today for whatever I'm doing. You could have that luxury of just moving things around whenever you want.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's incredible where the kayak fishing industry is today. Even from when I got in 2013 to see that progression over the last however many years, it's almost a decade actually, to see the level of progression in, now if you're getting into it, it's a great time to get into it. I mean, there's whatever brand you get, there's so much functionality. What I do like, and I've always been an advocate for any of these brands to do, which is to make it make it so that the end user has all the choices in how they want to rig it. So, a step in that direction was the gear tracks. Gear tracks is pretty much a standard in all these kayaks now, minus Hobie. Hobie has their own H-rail system.
And they also have, it depends on the model, they also have gear tracks.
Do they? Oh, yeah, they incorporated like on some slits, on the PA, like on the front board. Yeah, no, they have.
They have that, or at least the Outback comes with them. So they have a combination of each. Yeah. Depending on the model and just depending on your personal taste on what kind of mount you like using. And there's a lot of that, and which is cool because then you can really set it up to what you like and what you're going to do, and it alleviates the issue from early on of being stuck into one thing. Now you can go out, get holders or whatever accessory, put it on, and if you don't like it, you can change it around or throw it in the garbage,
sell it, or get another one. Replace it, whatever. How you're going to decide. I mean, there's a lot of,
and they're all really sturdy. Like when that stuff first started coming out, I was kind of leery. I was like, is that really going to hold up to a salmon strap? Is that just going to bend? Is it going to pop out?
It's a real common question folks ask about rod holders, especially for it's different when you're fishing for smaller fish, but for like a salmon, which is the apex, fish here for us is a salmon, king specifically. But can these rod holders your rods in the kayak, can it take a hit from a big
Yeah,
canyon?
or just the rails, like gear tracks and that. Could they? Because
That-
the
yeah.
first ones that were, there's aluminum ones now, and like the H rail is really solid. I was a little worried it wouldn't be as solid as it is when it first came out before I got to use it. But like I wasn't sure if the fish were going to be able to pull the rod holders out of these tracks. And pretty much everyone on the market works fine. Like I haven't seen one where they just fall out or anything like that. They
Yeah, and
all
I think
will.
your kayak's kind of a built-in shock absorber, right?
Yeah.
Like a salmon strike is not going to move a 35-foot boat backwards, but a salmon strike does turn your kayak instantly. Like that's sometimes how I feel a hit. I'll just be trolling, minding my own business, looking around.
You feel the
and
pull.
You just feel your boat turn to the right a little bit.
Yeah,
Or you
especially
feel-
like the big brown trout. Like when you get like the big 20-pound brown trout, and the rod just goes like this, and the kayak just slowly turns off to the side.
That's so for anybody wondering, that is not really an issue. I've never had an issue of a fish hitting so hard that it broke the stuff off or anything like that. I mean, I've lost a rod holder only because I never locked it in fully, and I went to go lift the rod, and the bait came out of the base. User error, it happens here and there, but everything that's out there in the market right now for anybody looking to get into this kind of fishing, especially out here on Lake Michigan, the gear is there, man. Everything is really solid. It's a really good space that we're in now for gear, for the kayaks themselves. What I would say for anybody new looking to get into it though is you really, my opinion here, if you're looking to get into it, you really only have two choices, and that's gonna be like a pedal or just going a motorized way. For the fact of like efficiency. Now, if you already have a paddle, you can definitely do it. They've done it. I started with a paddle as well. I quickly learned though, it's already tough to go out there and to fish. Why make it harder? So pedaling allows you to be hands free. That's a better system because we're 99% of the time we're trolling.
Right.
So you want to be able to, you need your hands to set your lines. You need to be moving while you're setting your lines. Otherwise your stuff's going to drop.
Yeah,
depending on what
even if you're
using.
not trolling, I mean, just having your hands free to cast and jig and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I don't think I'd even kayak fish anymore if I had to actually paddle.
I don't know how I'd be able to.
It's such a big difference that
Huge.
For anybody looking to get into it, just go straight to the pedals.
Yeah, and they sell affordable ones. You don't have to go all the way up to the Hobie Pro Angler or
Yeah, you can get Hobies now for like $1,500 with pedals.
the passports, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of options. That's for sure. There's a lot of options.
And you're going to spend almost that much for a paddle kayak in a lot of cases. So just get the pedals and be done with it and be happy.
And I would add on to that if you're looking to get one to get started, I've always been of the mindset of go and get the right one right away versus trying to do an incremental thing, because you end up it adds up costs over time, because you're going to buy that introductory level one that you might have saw at a big box store, whatever the case may be, and then you use it and you're like, well, doesn't have enough features I would like. Probably should have got the other one. So what do you end up doing? Trying to sell that one to then buy the other one. Well, you could have just got the one, this one up here, paid for it up front, and then not have to spend additional money.
I've definitely learned that the kayak itself is not something to cheap on.
Yeah.
So that's your equipment. So if you cheap on the kayak but you upgrade all your other stuff, that's the wrong way to do it. Take care of your kayak first. You can cheap on some of the other stuff. I mean, you could use gear that you already use, casting stuff, spinning stuff. You don't even need line counters to fish how we fish. You could just use spinning rods if you really wanted to. And
back
then
when we
upgrade
started,
from there.
I mean, I was trolling ambassadors with no line counter and just counting the level lines
Yep.
out. I knew when that thing went back. When I used a jet diver, I knew if I went 10 level lines, it was 30 feet down.
Yep.
Or whatever,
I would just cast a spinning rod off the back with a little Clio and start trolling around catching cohos. Or a keel weight and Dodger fly.
Yep.
I mean, just throw it back as far as I could, or not as far as I could, but
Just
threw
fling it back. Almost like a
Literally
cast.
just
Yeah.
Fling it back
That's
and
what
start trolling. And you'd catch fish.
Yep. Yeah.
Nothing fancy. I didn't have a depth finder at the time either. I had no idea what my speed was. I had no idea how deep I was. I only knew that going that way was east and going this way was west. That's all I knew.
It's pretty crazy. If there's one other thing additional that I think is equally as important than kayak that you need to have, you're gonna do a fish finder
with a GPS.
With a GPS, for a couple of reasons. One, you want to know your speed. The kind of fishing we're doing trolling here, and we're talking, taking away like the fall time when you're in the harbor, but like, you're gonna want to fish throughout the year, right? You're gonna want to go and fish in summer period. You have to kind of get offshore if you're gonna do it. So you need to know your speed. You need to know your depth. But also important is the safety aspect. How many times have we been out? Morning started fine, early morning, sun is just breaking over the surface. You're heading out, looks good, and out of nowhere, the fog from every horror movie possible rolls in on you, and you can't see but from here to 20 feet ahead of you.
I don't want to admit I'm way worse. I'm the worst.
Fog rolls in, I'm out of there. Phil wants to catch a few more fish and play Marco Polo.
I've played Marco Polo in 75 feet of water with charter boats that aren't under power. They're trolling. I could hear them talking. I can't see them anywhere. All of a sudden, just like a ghost ship right in front of me, they're 15 yards away. They don't even know I'm there. That's how scary that stuff is. And when you hear motors coming out of the harbor and you're close by and you're like, where's that coming? You don't even know how close they're going to get to you. That is some freaky stuff.
Yeah, I'm usually gone.
Yeah, Rob's like, you could go have fun, Marco Polo.
I'd rather be in 6-foot waves than that fog.
Ugh.
The fog, the fog is something crazy. And I mentioned it to kind of further make my point, which is outside of needing it for speed and your depth, if you're out there and the fog rolls in, you have no orientation factor. A lot of times it's very
really
quiet,
easy
and you may or may not hear noise coming from. I mean, a lot of times it's that early in the morning where it's quiet on the land. There's not a lot going on. It's not like the middle of the day where you hear stuff going on. It's really easy to lose your sense of orientation where you're at. Having the GPS, chart plotter, some form of electronics. I know a lot of guys go out there with like just the very standard ones that give you depth and temp and maybe some speed, but they don't necessarily have like the chart plotter that gives you your location. So important if you're out in open water to have.
And it doesn't have to be anything fancy, just as long as you have it. I mean, you can get a sonar GPS combo for pretty cheap
nowadays.
$150.
Yeah, nowadays.
So there's really no excuse for not having it. And you find all sorts of different applications that it comes in use. Even inland fishing, it helps out. You mark certain spots and stuff like that. So to me, it just is silly not to have one.
Yeah. And a good backup would be to like have Navionics on your phone, but what happens if your phone dies?
Compass.
So, really kind of go there. But some things I think are you just don't want to skimp out on. Not only do they improve your fishing opportunity, like your ability to catch, but it's also safety. And that's a big aspect of this fishing as a whole, is the safety in it. And so I would love to hear from each of you guys, kind of share a few things that come to mind, a few tips as it relates to safety that you want to share with folks that are looking to get into the fishing, are currently doing this fishing.
Feels very safety minded.
I was just gonna say, ask that question to him because I've made every wrong decision in terms of safety.
Well, it can be.
We could barely make it to shore in storms. I've
pushed the limit.
Phil's the one that pushes the limit, and I'm just like, you know what? I'm gonna call this early before it gets. I'm always the overly cautious one.
But I will tell you, I've learned a lot from those, not even close encounters, but like those difficult situations. I've learned a lot from them, and I can handle myself in them. If I don't feel comfortable, I will go in. But I've also not felt comfortable and had to go in. So
yeah, I mean that one trip, like we were watching the radar. There were storms to the north of us. There were storms going to the south of us, and we were kind of in this open area. There was nothing coming our way on the radar. And we get gusts of wind, and I actually had to get off the water anyways because I had to get here to work. But Phil just couldn't make up his mind if he should go in or not. And he'd start heading in, and then the wind would die down. He'd head back out. And then like it would get windy. He'd had to start heading back in, and then it would die down. He had to back out. But the thing is we were watching our radars on our phones, and there was stuff on there that we couldn't see. So luckily for me, like my phone, the radar, the frame was like one frame ahead of his. So I could just start to see this blip of a storm showing up that was coming right towards us. And I was able to tell him, like, I think you really, really need to get in.
It's raining on shore. It's not raining by me. I'm
like, you need to get in
50
here.
feet of water.
Because we were sending each other screenshots of the radar.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, there's nothing coming.
I'm good.
But I was like, my phone being one frame ahead just showed a little bit of a storm coming. I was like, you need to head in now. And I was already on shore. Mm-hmm. And then I sat there waiting for him. And he barely made it back. I mean, he didn't have like another moment.
Well, the biggest thing was I had my rudder turned all the way to the right because I was trying to go right, but the wind was blowing me so strong to the left. So I'm going to miss my spot on the shore. There was sand, a sand beach, and then rocks. And I literally came 10 feet from missing the beach and hitting the rocks. And if I hit the rocks, there were only rocks.
You were just stumbled on the rock line.
I would have
For miles.
For miles. I don't even know what I would have done. I couldn't like turn around and like try to fight the wind to get back to the beach. I was already
the
trying.
wind picked up so much that like every piece of anything on the beach, like just gusts came through. Any piece of garbage, everything was just flying by. Like I was just standing there.
I'm surfing trying to get
luckily
in.
Phil was close enough to shore that I could just laugh at him.
Yeah. He's looking at me. I'm like, help me. Ready to jump in. Remember that time that we went out with Larry Smith?
Yeah.
And you needed a multi-tool to tighten something? That was a rough day too.
That was a rough
day. And we were going and I came in. I'm like, I got you, Rob. I don't know how this worked, but I rode this wave in. Literally, like this wave is pushing me in and I tossed the multi-tool and like somehow steered out of it and went right back out. It was like, I was literally like on a surfboard. Mm-hmm. I was surfing toward Rob, but yeah, to that point, I mean, I've tipped in very shallow water and lost all my stuff because of a wave or trying to risk
surprisingly,
something.
like you wouldn't think that you could be in knee-deep water and lose all your gear and not be able to recover it.
And just get tipped out and feel like a complete idiot.
Like, well, why do you need to buy new stuff right now? Because you're only in like up to your knees.
My rods got swept out. My
The
tackle
current.
box. Yeah, there was current running right on the shore.
It's one thing that I've learned in my years is typically it's gonna happen, and we're talking about the tip.
It will happen.
It happens to it happened to me. It's why I sold my Outback. I distinctly remember out of Waukegan, leaving out northeast troll. I put on a purple Destin flicker shed on one rod. I'm trolling out with it. Got that one rod out. Set up the other one. Set up the other one. Sun is just breaking the horizon, and boom, this rod just goes bent down. I'm like, oh. So I pull it out. I start fighting it. Now, I made a mistake here. And this is early on in my like Lake Michigan kayak fishing experience. But as I always tell people, like the minute you start fighting fish, just turn yourself and get the fish in front of you. Mm-hmm. I didn't do this. I'm fighting the fish from the side. I'm still going this way, pedaling. Fish is back over here, pulling really hard, rod's down. And so now I'm trying to do one of these, trying to get leverage, pulling this way. Fish is going that way. What happens? Pop. Zoop. I slid right. It's flat, calm morning. I slide right in the water. Kayak turtles over, stuff is in the water. It's a mess. It happens. I say that to say that a lot of times these tips will happen when you least expect it.
I mean, if you expect it, it's not going to happen, right? Because you're going to be ready for it. It's just
and you're
going to
be paying attention.
Yeah.
And you're more aware. So like when I'm out deep, like deeper water, I'm always cognizant. I'm really aware. But you might be by shore, you're just leaving the harbor or Atlanta Beach. Oh, and then you go because you're not really thinking that it's going to happen right in that spot where you're near shore or it's shallow water.
Well, like beach launching is way more difficult than launching on a launch.
Rob knows this. The last time I beach launched was with him. I hate beach launching.
It's hard.
It's a lot.
If it's rough. Otherwise,
not even. I mean, even 1 foot waves that are coming up, like you're going and you're trying to get your pedals in, but if the water is still shallow, you have to paddle out. Yeah. Like you have to be straight into those waves because if you turn at all, that wave is gonna knock you over.
The thing about it for me is if I have the opportunity to just launch in a harbor somewhere where it's just easy to get in and you just go, I would do that. I'd choose that 100% of the time. I think the thing for me for beach launching is it's a lot that can go wrong with a of course, like there's a way you want to do it. You want to read the wave pattern coming in and all this stuff to time your launch. But to me, the recovery in is the most dangerous part of it all because now you got the waves to your back. And a lot of times, if you try to glance back, then you're not focused on what's in front of you. It can just be a little more, a lot more going on. If you don't have your gear secured and you do tank, there goes all your gear. To me, the beach approach.
I think it just takes practice. I mean, I've been beach launching for as long as I've been kayak fishing, and I don't mind it at all. The only thing that I mind about beach launching is dragging my kayak down the beach.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No. Oh, yeah. I thought you meant this. Yeah.
I mean, I've sent my kayaks down some pretty rough stuff. Like
when he said, wait. Yeah, no. When he says sends them, he really like full sends it. He just chucks it. Folks,
down boulders.
He doesn't care. He throws them down there.
Oh, there's a rock that looks like it would.
It's kind of flat right there, so it'll just slide right down.
Yeah.
I mean, I've slid in from like ice, like where you get like the big ice mountains that build up on the beach, after it's been wavy, and you get like these 5 foot tall. I've slid on from that. I don't care. But I guess once you start doing it, some of these ways that I've launched before down boulders and everything, just a regular beach launch doesn't seem such a big deal anymore.
It's actually a bigger pain in the butt dragging your kayak through the dry sand. Because your feet are like getting stuck in it, and you got all this stuff on it.
There's that too.
That's where a good set of wheels comes in handy. It makes a big difference.
It makes a big difference, yeah. And these kayaks are big. They're big and heavy. Mm-hmm. So to me it adds to the workload of trying to get out and go fish. Now, if the fishing is pretty spectacular and this one spot is like key, then
we've got spots like that.
Yep.
And I mean, it's a long way to get there from a harbor. So if you want to hit those spots, you want a beach launch. And then the cool thing about that is, though, with the beach launches is like, if it's that far away from a harbor, it might not be getting hit by boats, because a lot of times the boats just kind of like head out at an angle this way, head out at an angle that way, and then there's these little areas near shore that hold fish, but they're just totally bypassed. Because everybody just goes straight out, or they kind of, they don't even go near those fish. And so you're finding untouched fish in areas that there's no fishing pressure, and you don't even have to worry about boats fishing by it.
No, that is, you said this before in our conversation, that is 1,000% like the argument for it. I mean, it's very valid, because you are away from the boats. You don't have to worry about that early morning. I mean, we've all been in a situation, you launch from a harbor or whatever, and you start working, you might start setting your lines in 30 feet of water, which is still close. You're just outside the harbor mouth, and you've got the fleet coming out, whipping. And
nobody can see you out there. And that's a big thing.
Yeah.
You have to assume that no one can see you, ever.
Yeah, you always just pretend you're invisible. And this is like my main safety thing. Obviously you have to have all your safety equipment and everything, but the biggest thing that I see, the biggest mistake that I see kayakers making, they're just not being illuminated enough. They're going out in the dark or right at dawn, and they have, I'll be honest with you, there's no good kayak lights on the market that are being produced by any real.
It could be that. I think that's the real opportunity for someone to make that.
And so none of them are bright enough. Like, they might be fine for fishing some little inland lakes or something where there's not a lot of boat traffic. But when you're fishing on big water with big boats, the kayaks are really hard to see unless you have a very, very bright light. You blend right into everything. So that's why I made my own light. And nobody can miss me out there. You're clearly not paying any attention at all if you can't see me. And I think that's one of the biggest safety things for what we're doing, for our kind of fishing out here.
Yeah, and we're talking about dawn, but at night, at dusk, it's even worse, because as the boats are coming in and you're a light,
it blends in with shoreline.
Lights.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. In those cases, like this past fall, because I would fish in the evenings, it's better bite for me. For my light, what I would do is I'd have the Visi light going on, and then I had another couple lights, and I would turn on the strobe. Mm-hmm. So that strobe is enough to make it different from everything on the shoreline is just on. You
Yeah.
see all the little lights, but something strobing in a pattern is not something you see. So that could be a little tip for folks to
The strobe,
something
I've
different.
definitely used the strobe.
Yeah,
But
it's
I
just something
still-
different that catches people's eye.
Yeah,
Like, okay,
sure.
what's that?
Yeah, what's going on over there?
Yeah.
But I've just had too many times where boats are coming at me while I was fighting a fish and didn't want to deal with my strobe light. Because I've definitely used the strobe quite a bit. But yeah, just be absolutely as bright as possible. Lights are cheap. Like if you don't buy an actual kayak fish, like the kayak fishing lights that are out there that are marketed towards kayak fishermen, they're kind of expensive. And I'll be honest with you, like I don't think they're very good. Any of them. You can buy cheap LED lights that like anywhere. You can buy them at Walmart. And different types, like they have some that are meant for like bike handles. If you have an A-trail or some sort of rail mount on your kayak, they mount right to it. They're like $7 for a pair of them. They'll last a whole season. And you can make them strobe. You can make them stay solid. You can do all these different things. So I used to have those all over my kayak.
Yeah.
You know, you couldn't miss me.
Rob looked like a disco.
Yeah.
He was out there. He'd have green lights, red lights, white lights.
So it's actually a really inexpensive thing to keep yourself safe.
So, for me, I'm very passionate about kayak fishing. I could talk about this all day, every day. But obviously, for the purpose of the podcast, we want to close this thing off here. I do want to end on this topic, which is etiquette, kayak fishing etiquette. We've all seen the numbers of kayak anglers increase year over year, I think. And it's I foresee it to continue to grow. And so with that, with there being more kayak anglers on the water, it adds to the challenges for not only kayak anglers, but for boaters as well, because there's more little guys out there fishing around. So I want to ask for each of you to share one big kind of kayak etiquette tip, something that folks should be adhering to for the betterment of the entire community and for safety purposes. What would that be for you, Phil?
My biggest thing is if you're going out in a kayak and you notice that there's 8 other kayaks, keep an eye on them. Like whether they're with your group or not with your group, just kind of know that there's that many kayaks out there and try to keep tabs on them just to make sure everyone's safe. Because, we've done a couple of those tournaments and there's 20, 30 kayaks out there and somebody didn't come back and it wasn't a very sad day. But keeping an eye on it. And then I think, the other thing, you can't get mad at anyone. So, I've seen some spats between boats and kayaks because we're in their spot, they're in our spot, whatever it is. But the lake is huge, and I understand that everyone wants to get to a certain spot if that's the spot on the spot. But you know what? We're very maneuverable. Boats aren't. Boats are bigger, and it doesn't matter who has the right of way or not. If you're not there to talk about who was at fault, who's going to win? You know what I mean? Like if a boat is supposed to give way to you, but you're saying, "Oh, screw you! I'm the right of way. I need to go there." What if he runs you over? Then you're not there to even talk about it. So, just play the little guy all the time. Mm-hmm. Don't try to battle the boats. You will get your turn to get to the spot, but you're in a plastic boat. They're in a big fiberglass boat. Do not battle with the boats. Pull up your line, stop, do whatever you need to do. Go behind them.
Rob?
To get, I guess, a little bit less of a serious thing of etiquette, like if you're using a boat launch, don't sit there for an hour and talk and clog up the boat launch because the boats are in and out pretty fast and they're all waiting for you. So that's one thing. And then to kind of add on to what Phil was talking about, being mindful of where everybody is around you, but also stay out of their way. Like, I don't know how many times a kayaker has gone right in front of me and then just stopped and rested. And then I'm just stuck because they wanted to take a break. Like, go take a break where there aren't people. Like, don't take a break right in the harbor mouth when all the boats are coming by. Don't take, just if you want to take your break, get out of the way. But just be mindful, there's plenty of places to catch fish. Just spread out and have fun. Don't worry about getting right on the spot. And don't expect everybody to get out of your way.
Yeah, because they won't.
Yeah. And they might not be able to. That's a big thing. Because there's a lot of there's a lot of people that are kayak fishing now that are new to kayak fishing, but they're also new to like boating,
like Michigan,
and they don't have the
yeah.
experience. So like the one thing that we've had a lot of experience fishing in boats our whole lives, so we kind of know what's going on, what these boats are doing, what they're thinking, what they're, we see them heading in a direction, we kind of have idea what they're going to do, and we know that, they're just going to keep heading in that direction because they might not have a choice. There's a boat on the other side of them.
Yeah, they're pinched in.
That might get too shallow on one side. They can't, with all their lines out, they can't get out of your way, right? They don't have a choice. They have to keep going. So you need to get out of their way, regardless of right of way or anything, because they're not going to be able to. They're not going to let themselves get pinched into the pier and snag all their stuff. They're not going to be. They can't stop. So be mindful of that, because otherwise you're going to get tangled with them, and then you get into the spats and arguments.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I would add on for my point to this same question. Obviously, kind of read the room, and I think what you guys say speaks to that. If you're fishing, fishing on the weekend is gonna be a totally different experience than fishing on the weekday. On the weekday, you might have free reign to the harbor mouth to just do whatever you want, go back and forth across that harbor mouth to your heart's content. On the weekend, don't do it. Don't even. It's a risk. You're putting the boats are coming in and out, and it just becomes a hassle.
And not to mention the shore guys too. I mean, you should be pretty respectful of them just because you're in a kayak on the water. Like, you don't want to be the guy that just keeps going in and out of the river mouth and making these guys wait for you to get by them with all your lines going through. And don't run planer boards in the harbors if there's other boats. That's my other thing.
So you're getting to what I was going to say for mine, which is knowing the flow of harbor fishing, right? So when, it's just like driving. When you drive, you're on the right lane, opposite traffic's on the left lane. So if you're trolling in any of the harbors, it's always a counterclockwise flow. Now, if you're in there by yourself, you could do whatever. But the moment you start getting other traffic, other kayakers, other boats, this is more prevalent. This is really more evident in the fall time, obviously, because then everyone's in nearshore harbors and all that stuff. Counterclockwise. It's a everyone does the rotation. You always see the few that are just zigzagging across, going clockwise. You're messing up the flow for everyone.
Yeah, and if you're handling a fish or you want to change baits or do all this stuff where you're gonna like stop moving, just get out of the way and then do it. Don't just stop right where you're at. Just get out into the middle of it where everybody's going in circles around you, and then take care of your fish or do whatever you're doing.
And jump in. I will say when I went out to the Pacific Northwest, they actually have like that flow down. It's second nature to all of them. Whereas,
because there's so many people.
Yeah.
And they don't catch fish. Not like us.
Oh, Lord. But, I think for me that would be a big etiquette thing, which is just kind of knowing the flow, knowing that kind of like the rules of the road apply still to boating. And there's you exit out of a harbor on the right side, you're going to enter in from the left. So if you're going to work in there, you're going to troll same way, down the right side, go all the way to the end of the mouth, come all the way back in from the other side, so that you're not interfering with the boats that are coming in, normal passage, and other folks that might be fishing the same area. And, you always do want to, like Phil, great point. I mean, because a lot of times kayak anglers, it kind of occupy the same space that shore guys will. It's easy for guys to kind of forget that they're there and not be just aware that, they have a right to fish as well, and you don't want to interfere with them.
I was a shore guy. Yeah. I don't want to interfere with them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I remember in the fall, I had, when you get a fish, you can't control it. It dragged me through some guy's stuff along the shore, and I felt terrible. I was like, guys, I'm so sorry. The fish dragged me. They were cool about it. Hey, no problem. We get it. I said, here, it's a female. Take it. They're like, oh, hell yeah. I didn't want any more fish, and it's just an inconvenience. So here,
Yeah.
It goes a long way. I mean, we're all part of a fishing community. I don't think we, getting into we're kayak only, and being aware, man. I think it goes a long way, and it helps because then they might give you some tips on what's working for.
Yeah. And
those guys are usually pretty good.
No, they are.
One other thing is don't be in a huge rush to get out there, especially when it comes to like harbor fishing and stuff. Because I'll see everybody's in a rush to get out there, and then all the charters come out at the same time. Or about the same time, within like 15 minutes of each other, you're not really missing out on anything. Just wait 15 minutes, let all those boats get through, and then everything just opens up for you. I see like people are in a rush. They get out into some rough stuff. It's still dark. None of these big boats can see them. And then you're in like some hairy situations, or if you just waited 15 minutes, you've been fine.
You know, I actually, this past year, I actually started, before I would always try to get to the launch at like 3:45, 4 a.m. before it's still dark and get already going. And actually last year I started doing fishing like 7 a.m. So now you got all the boats are out. And I would just like fish from like 7 to like 11. It's actually pretty good. I actually had a good overall experience, still catching fish. And then I would get into like that late morning bite, but to what you were saying, it alleviates the issue you running into like the early morning boat traffic coming, charters and wreck fishermen coming in and out. You're not in the dark, going out early, sun up and stuff like that. Something to think about. I know not everyone has the opportunity to do that, but if you can, to your point, it actually is it is pretty good. I enjoyed it. And the best part is not having to wake up.
The best time, I was going to say the best time to go fishing is when you can go fishing, but second best time, I'm the early guy. I'll be down there at 3 in the morning trying to get out. I don't want to. I have FOMO. I don't want to miss out on a bite. When somebody calls me, they're like, "Oh my God, they bid at 3:30. Why weren't you here?" And I'm like, "Oh, I want to sleep in."
The thing is, when you're talking about that early, it's rarely the case.
It's rarely the case. I always waste time, and it's always they bite at the same freaking time every morning. When that sun is coming up, like 20 minutes before to an hour after, and then like you said, I mean, there's mid-afternoon bites. There's bites that can happen all day. If you're out there, it's a good day.
Yep.
That's true. So with that being said, guys, thank you for joining us on this episode of the Lake Michigan Angler Podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed the conversation here. Just a broad convo on kayak fishing. We didn't dive into too many specifics, but I think we're going to be doing that in a future episode.
There's so many other things.
There's so many. Yeah, I mean, we're just touching the surface on it all. But thank you to Phil for joining us over here as well. And of course, if you guys ever need anything from us, make sure you guys hit us up. Go ahead and throw the video a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. We definitely appreciate sharing it as well. And we'll see you guys on the next episode.